My parents gave our $10 million family business to my younger sister because she was better with people. I was the one who built our entire client list from scratch, so I packed my desk and left without a word. By the end of the month, their desperate calls were nonstop, so I made one phone call of my own and took back everything they had stolen. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The hum of the espresso machine was the only thing cutting through the sterile silence of my office. It was 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I was running on fumes and the dregs of a lukewarm coffee. My desk was a disaster zone of architectural blueprints, supplier invoices, and material samples. I was in the middle of finalizing the logistics for the massive Grayson account, a complex, multi-floor corporate installation that was worth 40% of our annual revenue. A migraine was pounding a sharp, rhythmic beat behind my right eye, a familiar companion during what we called Crunch Week. I had just sent the final confirmation email to Mr. Grayson's executive team when my office phone rang. It was my mother, Susan. Her voice was uncharacteristically bright, almost giddy. "Emma, darling, are you still at that dreary office?" she chirped. "You must come home. Your father and I have the most wonderful announcement. We're having a special dinner, just the four of us." "Mom, I'm buried," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "The Grayson project install is Monday. I can't." "Don't be silly, it can wait," she interrupted, her tone shifting from airy to insistent. "This is important. It's about the future of the company. Be here by 8, and wear something nice, not your work trousers." The line clicked dead before I could protest again. A cold knot of dread settled in my stomach, tightening its grip as I drove the familiar route home. My parents, Arthur and Susan, had been hinting at retirement for a year. I had run Artisan Corporate Design, our family's high-end interior and exhibit firm, as the operations director for nearly 15 years. I'd started in the warehouse while I was still in college, learning the business from the ground up, from the weight of the materials to the complexities of international shipping. Now, at 36, I managed every high-value account, negotiated every contract, and personally oversaw the execution of every major project. My younger sister, Georgia, who was 30, ran our marketing. She was beautiful, charming, and charismatic. She was the one who went to the galas, networked at cocktail parties, and ran the company's vibrant social media feeds. Our roles were supposed to be symbiotic. I built the machine and kept it running. She polished the exterior until it gleamed. I arrived at my parents' house at 8:05 p.m., still in my black slacks and a silk blouse, feeling exhausted and out of place. Georgia was already there, glowing in a new emerald green dress, her laughter echoing from the dining room. "There she is," my father Arthur boomed as I walked in. He kissed my cheek, his eyes sparkling. "Right, sit down, we've just opened the good champagne." We sat around the heavy mahogany table, the same one we'd eaten at my entire life. The air was thick with anticipation. My mother, radiating pure joy, clutched my father's hand. "Well," Arthur began, clearing his throat, "your mother and I have had a long talk. We're 62 now, and it's time for us to finally step back. It's time for the next generation to take over Artisan Corporate Design." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The moment I had worked for my entire adult life. The validation, the responsibility, the recognition. "We are so proud of what we've built," Susan said, her eyes glistening. "But a company is more than just logistics and contracts, Emma. It's about relationships. It's about a vision. It's about heart." The knot in my stomach returned, icy and sharp. "Which is why," Arthur continued, turning to beam at my sister, "we are thrilled to announce that we are naming Georgia as the new CEO." The air left my lungs in a silent rush. I'm sure my face did something, twitched or paled, but I felt frozen. I stared at my father, waiting for the rest of the sentence, waiting for him to announce my own, presumably equal, role. "And Emma," my mother said, finally turning to me, her smile becoming slightly strained, as if she anticipated my reaction. "We've created a new, vital position just for you. You'll be our official head of logistics. You'll report directly to Georgia, of course. It's perfect. You can keep handling all those complicated details you're so good at, and Georgia can focus on leading the company forward." I looked at my sister. She was beaming, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. As she hadn't just accepted this, she had known, she had celebrated it. "Oh, Emmy, isn't it wonderful?" Georgia gushed, reaching across the table to grab my hand. Her skin was warm, mine was ice cold. "We're going to be such a team." I slowly pulled my hand away, the silence stretched, my father's smile faltered. "Well, what do you think, Emma?" I looked at the three of them, my family. The people who had watched me sacrifice my nights, my weekends, my relationships, and my health for their company. "Why?" My voice came out as a whisper, raspy and small. My father, a man who hated emotional confrontation, shifted in his chair. "Well, it's as your mother said, a leader needs to inspire. Georgia, she's just better with people, Emma. She has the warmth, the charm. You're brilliant, we all know that, but you're more of a behind-the-scenes person." Better with people. The words echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of my ears. I wasn't the one who had spent a decade building ironclad relationships with Mr. Grayson, with the partners at Lee & Sons, with the board of Apex Solutions. I wasn't the one they called on my personal cell phone, at all hours, trusting me to fix the unfixable. No, that was just logistics. Georgia, who barely knew our clients' names beyond what she needed for an Instagram tag, was better with people. I looked down at my plate. The food was untouched. I picked up my napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table. "Thank you for the dinner," I said, my voice eerily calm. I stood up. "Emma, don't be dramatic," my mother snapped, her brief moment of joy evaporating into her usual defensiveness. "We're offering you a secure future." I looked at her, at my father, who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes, and at my sister, whose smile had finally dissolved into a petulant pout, as if I was the one ruining her perfect evening. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't yell or cry or plead my case. I simply turned, walked out of the dining room, and let the heavy front door click shut behind me. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it felt like a physical weight. It was heavier and colder than any diagnosis. It was a severance. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. I operated on autopilot, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The pounding in my head had subsided, replaced by a hollow, ringing void. When I walked into my apartment, the first thing I saw was my work bag, still sitting by the door, and my laptop open on the coffee table, still displaying the finalized Grayson project plan. A wave of nausea, so powerful it buckled my knees, washed over me. I sat on the floor, my back against the cold drywall, and tried to breathe. It wasn't just the title. It wasn't just the money. It was the complete and utter invalidation of my entire life's work. They hadn't just overlooked me, they had demoted me. They had looked at the engine of the company and decided the pretty hood ornament was the one who made the car run. They had handed the keys to my sister, who didn't even know how to check the oil. My phone buzzed on the floor. A text from Georgia. "Emmy, you're overreacting. Mom is really upset. Just come back and we can talk this out tomorrow." Another from my mother. "Emma, your behavior was incredibly immature. Your father and I made a business decision. You are expected to be at the office tomorrow at 9 a.m. to help Georgia with the transition." I stared at the messages, a bitter, unfamiliar laugh bubbling in my chest. Help her with the transition. They still didn't get it. They thought I was having a tantrum. They thought I would sulk for a night and then dutifully show up, the good, reliable daughter, to hand over the reins of the kingdom I had built to the new queen. I picked up my phone, but I didn't reply to them. Instead, I opened my email and drafted a new message. It was addressed to my father, my mother, and my sister. Subject, resignation. Dear Arthur, Susan, and Georgia. Please accept this email as my formal and immediate resignation from Artisan Corporate Design, effective immediately. I will not be returning to the office. Sincerely, Emma. I hit send. The sense of finality was as terrifying as it was liberating. I stood up and walked to my desk. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have another job. All I had was a deep, bone-weary certainty that I would rather file for bankruptcy than spend one more minute of my life working for people who saw me as nothing more than a glorified cog in their machine. I spent the next 2 hours packing. I emptied my home office, boxing up the design awards that had my name on them, the technical manuals I'd memorized, the framed photos of completed projects. I packed a suitcase. I wasn't just leaving the company, I was leaving the city. I needed to get away, to breathe air that wasn't thick with their expectations and my disappointment. I booked a one-way ticket to a small coastal town 3 states away, leaving in the morning. As I was zipping up my suitcase, my personal cell phone rang. The caller ID read, Mr. Grayson. My heart leaped into my throat. It was nearly 11 p.m. He never called this late unless it was a 5-alarm fire. I almost let it go to voicemail. It wasn't my problem anymore. But 15 years of deeply ingrained habit took over. I answered. Mr. Grayson, I said, my voice automatically shifting into its professional, calming cadence. Is everything all right? Emma, his voice was gruff, but I could hear the undercurrent of concern. I'm sorry to call so late. I just got off a red-eye from Tokyo and saw your email about the Monday install. It looks perfect, as always. But I just received a strange email from your sister. I froze. My sister. Yes, something about her being the new point of contact. It was vague, full of marketing buzzwords. It said the install schedule was shifting to a new dynamic paradigm. What on earth does that mean? I replied asking for clarification on the delivery window for the server room fixtures, and she sent me a link to the company's new Instagram reel. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. Emma, I'm going to be blunt, Mr. Grayson continued, his patience clearly gone. My board is breathing down my neck. This launch is tied to our Q4 projections. I don't have time for dynamic paradigms. I need to know from you that my 8 a.m. Monday delivery window is secure. My trust is in you, not in a social media account. I took a deep breath. This was the moment, the first real test of my decision. Mr. Grayson? David, I said, using his first name for the first time in our decade-long relationship. I need to inform you that as of about 2 hours ago, I have resigned from Artisan Corporate Design. I can no longer personally guarantee the execution of your project. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I see, he said finally, his voice flat. Is this a permanent resignation? It is, I said. Another silence. I could hear him thinking. Well, this is a problem, a significant problem. He paused again. Emma, you are the only reason I've stayed with Artisan. Your father's pricing is average and your sister's marketing is an annoyance. Your logistics, your execution, is the entire value proposition. They're fools. Thank you, David, I whispered, a tear finally breaking free and rolling down my cheek. Don't thank me, just tell me where you're going, he said. Because wherever you land, my account is coming with you. But for now, I have a phone call to make to your father. This is going to be a very unpleasant conversation for him. He hung up. I stared at the phone. My family hadn't just forgotten who their most valuable clients were. They had forgotten one crucial thing, why those clients stayed. They thought the accounts were tied to the company name. They had no idea they were tied, with bonds of steel forged over a decade of trust, directly to me. The coastal town I fled to was a blur of gray skies and misty mornings. I rented a small cottage by the sea and spent the first 3 days just walking on the beach, letting the cold spray of the ocean scour the toxic residue of the last 15 years from my mind. My phone was a relentless buzz of notifications. Dozens of missed calls from my parents. A string of increasingly panicked and then angry texts from Georgia. Georgia, what did you say to Mr. Grayson? He called Dad and tore him to shreds. Georgia, he's threatening to pull the account. You need to call him and fix this. Georgia, Emma, stop being such a child and answer your phone. You are sabotaging me. I read them with a detached, cold sense of calm, and then powered my phone off. The betrayal cut so deep because I had given them everything. I was the responsible one since I was a child. While Georgia was at cheerleading practice and prom, I was at the office, learning how to use the design software, organizing invoices, and cleaning the workshop. When I was in college, getting my degree in business and project management, I wasn't at parties. I was at the office, pulling all-nighters to build the very client management system they still used. I'd personally landed our first major account, Lee & Sons, when I was just 24. I'd overheard Mr. Lee complaining at a trade show that his current supplier was always late. I stepped in, not with a flashy sales pitch, but with a simple, laminated flowchart I'd created, showing our exact logistical process, from order to delivery, with built-in redundancies. He was so impressed by the sheer, boring competence of it that he gave me a trial project. I executed it flawlessly. 15 years later, Lee & Sons was still one of our most loyal clients. But my parents, they only saw what they wanted to see. They saw Georgia, sparkling at a charity gala, charming a potential new contact. They didn't see me, 3D. Wise later, in a hard hat at a loading dock at 3 a.m., personally ensuring that client's million-dollar exhibit arrived undamaged. My work was invisible, a network of steel cables running beneath the surface, holding everything up. George's work was the fresh coat of paint on the exterior, and my parents were convinced the paint was holding up the building. The true antagonist, I realized, wasn't just my parents' blind favoritism. It was Georgia herself. Her charm wasn't just warmth, it was a tool. A carefully honed weapon of plausible deniability. She was the queen of soft power. She never gave a direct order, but she always got her way. I remembered a meeting last year. We were pitching Apex Solutions. I had prepared a 40-page proposal detailing a phased, year-long rollout for their new corporate headquarters. It was intricate, cost-effective, and efficient. Georgia, who had read none of it, swept into the meeting 10 minutes late, wearing a stunning dress. She smiled at the CEO and said, "The proposal is just numbers. What I want to talk about is the feeling you'll get when you walk into your new lobby. The vibe." She then proceeded to show them a 5-minute mood reel she'd made, set to trendy music, showing pictures of sunsets, art galleries, and high-end hotel lobbies. None of which had anything to do with our actual capabilities or their specific needs. After the meeting, the CEO had pulled me aside. "Your sister is enthusiastic," he'd said, "but your proposal is why we're signing. Don't let that vibe mess with your timeline." Georgia, however, had told our parents that she had saved the meeting and closed the deal with her personal touch. And they believed her. They always believed her. She had a way of subtly positioning my competence as a weakness. My attention to detail was rigidity. My focus on logistics was cold. My lack of interest in schmoozing was poor social skills. She had spent years laying the groundwork for this, painting herself as the heart of the company and me as the unfeeling brain. My parents, desperate to believe their charming, easy-to-love daughter was also a brilliant leader, bought the narrative hook, line, and sinker. They wanted the easy, pretty answer. They wanted the company's future to look like Georgia, shiny, effortless, and popular. They didn't want to admit that the company's actual foundation was me, difficult, demanding, and exhausting. I turned my phone back on after a full week of silence. The barrage of messages was overwhelming, but one, in particular, caught my eye. It was from a sender I didn't recognize. Subject: Artisan Design. "Ms. Emma, I received your name from Mr. David Grayson. He mentioned you have recently become a free agent. I am the procurement manager for Apex Solutions. We have been informed that Artisan is restructuring. We are not confident in their ability to handle our Q3 project. If you are starting your own consultancy, we would be very interested in discussing a new contract." I read the email 3 times. Then I saw another one from Mr. Lee at Lee and Sons with a similar message. Mr. Grayson hadn't just pulled his own account. He had, it seemed, made a few calls on my behalf. A slow smile spread across my face. The fog in my head, the heavy weight of grief and betrayal, suddenly began to lift. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't unemployed. I was, as the email said, a free agent. And I had a phone full of clients who were suddenly, desperately, in need of my services. My family thought my skills were a liability, but to the people who actually paid the bills, my rigidity and coldness looked an awful lot like reliability and competence. I opened my laptop, and instead of looking for flights home, I started researching business incorporation laws. The moment I decided to fight back, the world shifted on its axis. The grief didn't vanish, but it crystallized into a hard, clear sense of purpose. My family saw me as a supporting character in their story. It was time to write my own. My clever trap wasn't a complex scheme. It was simply my professional reputation, an asset my family had never bothered to insure. It was the one thing they couldn't take from me. I spent the next 2 weeks in that coastal cottage, not relaxing, but building a fortress. I registered an LLC, Vance Design Logistics. The name Vance was my grandmother's, a woman of quiet, unshakable strength. It felt appropriate. I drained my personal savings to hire a top-tier corporate lawyer and a freelance accountant. I built a simple, professional website in 48 hours, outlining my services, not as a designer, but as a specialized project execution and logistics consultant for high-end corporate interiors. My first official video call was with Mr. Grayson. "Vance Design," he said, a small smile playing on his lips as he read the name from his screen. "I like it. It sounds solid, like it won't send me a mood reel." "That's the I'd." David," I said, feeling a spark of my old self return. "No dynamic paradigms. Just timelines, manifests, and flawless execution." "That's all I've ever wanted," he said. He forwarded me the email chain between himself and my family. It was a train wreck. After he had pulled his contract, my father had sent a fuming, unprofessional email accusing him of disloyalty. Georgia, in a desperate attempt to fix it, had then offered him a 20% discount and a free social media engagement package to showcase his brand's synergy with ours. "She offered to tag me on Instagram, Emma," Mr. Grayson said, his disbelief palpable. As if that would fix a multi-million-dollar breach of confidence. He wasn't just ready to sign with me, he was eager. We spent an hour outlining a new contract that would give Vance Design full logistical oversight of his project, cutting Artisan out completely. But I knew I couldn't just build my company, I had to understand what I was up against. The sheer speed of Artisan's collapse was faster than I'd anticipated. Losing the Grayson account was a 40% revenue hit, but the panic in my family's texts suggested something more. I hired a corporate risk analyst, a discreet professional my lawyer recommended, to do a deep dive into Artisan's current financial health. I needed to know, from an objective standpoint, what was left of the company I had built. While he worked, I focused on my other clients. I had a long call with Mr. Lee of Lee and Sons. "Emma, thank goodness," he said, his voice full of relief. "We have our annual trade show in Vegas in 3 weeks. Your sister informed my assistant that she's reimagining our exhibit. Emma, it's the same exhibit we've used for 5 years. We just need it shipped and assembled." She sent me a bill for a creative consultation and a quote for a new experiential booth with a built-in DJ. I winced. "Mr. Lee, I am no longer with Artisan, but I have just launched my own logistics firm. If you can get your exhibit materials released to my new shipping partner, I can have my team on the ground in Vegas and have you trade show ready in 48 hours. "Done," he said, without a moment's hesitation. "Send me the contract." One by one, the pillars of Artisan corporate design crumbled and reformed around Vance Design Logistics. Apex Solutions followed a day later. By the end of week 3, I had secured contracts worth over 60% of Artisan's former high-value business. The risk analyst's report came back on a Friday afternoon. It was devastating. I'd known the business, of course, but I hadn't been in the high-level financial meetings for the last 6 months. My parents and Georgia had started having leadership dinners without me. The report showed why. Artisan was leveraged to the hilt. My father, emboldened by Georgia's vision for expansion, had taken out 2 massive, high-interest loans in the last year. One was to open a splashy new design studio in a high-rent district that Georgia insisted they needed. The other was to finance a rebranding campaign run by a laughably expensive PR firm that was one of Georgia's friends. The company had been operating on razor-thin margins, entirely dependent on the steady, massive cash flow from the exact clients I had just signed: Grayson, Lee & Sons, and Apex. The profit from my projects was paying for Georgia's fantasies. They weren't just in trouble. They were insolvent. The loans were contingent on the company maintaining a certain valuation and revenue stream. With those 3 clients gone, they were in catastrophic default. My family hadn't just handed my sister a thriving business. They had handed her a ticking time bomb, and I had just walked away with the defusal codes. They had about a week, the analyst projected, before the banks called in the loans and seized the company's assets. The trap was set, and I hadn't had to do a single thing but be competent. My family's own arrogance and my sister's boundless, unchecked ambition had done all the work for me. The final, frantic call came that night. It was my mother. She wasn't yelling. She was sobbing. Emma, you have to come home," she wept into the phone. "The bank, they're calling, they're talking about foreclosure on the building. Your father, he's a wreck. Georgia, she's not. She can't. Oh, God, Emma, please, you have to help us. You're the only one who knows how to fix this." The request, after everything, was so breathtaking in its audacity that I almost laughed. "I'll be there tomorrow," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "Let's have an emergency meeting. At the office, 10 a.m. I flew back on the first flight the next morning. I didn't go to my old apartment. I checked into a luxury hotel in the downtown business district. I spent an hour with my lawyer, reviewing the analyst's report and signing the final contracts for Vance Design. Then, I took a cab to the office. The splashy new design stud Georgia had insisted on was a parody of bad taste. The lobby, which used to be a model of clean, efficient corporate design, was now painted a sickening shade of millennial pink. A giant, tacky neon sign flickered on the wall, reading the vibe. The reception desk was empty. The entire place had the heavy, stale feeling of a sinking ship. I walked through the open-plan office. Desks were a mess. Half the lights were off. The few employees who were there looked up at me with wide, panicked eyes as if they'd seen a ghost. I was no longer Emma, the operations director. I was an omen. I walked to the main conference room. The door was open. My family was waiting. They looked decimated. My father, Arthur, who had always been a large, bombastic man, seemed to have shrunk. He sat slumped in his chair, his face gray and papery. My mother, Susan, her eyes red and swollen from crying, sat beside him, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. And then there was Georgia. She was standing by the window, wearing ripped jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, her hair thrown up in a messy bun. The polished, charismatic CEO was gone. In her place was a petulant, terrified young woman who looked like she was about to be sick. "Emma," my mother breathed, standing up as I walked in. "Thank God." I didn't sit down. I placed my leather portfolio on the gleaming, unused conference table and stood at its head. "You called a meeting," I said. My voice was not warm, it was not cold, it was neutral, the voice of a consultant. "It's a disaster," my father mumbled, not looking at me. "Grayson is gone, Lee & Sons, Apex. They've all left, they all say the same thing, they'll only work with you." "And the bank," my mother chimed in, her voice rising with hysteria. "They called the loans. We used the building as collateral for the expansion. They're going to take everything, Emma, Everything your father and I worked for. I see, I said. Georgia finally spun around from the window, her face contorted in a mask of pure fury. You did this, she shrieked, pointing a finger at me. This is your fault. You sabotaged me. You stole my clients. The sheer, unadulterated nerve of it almost made me smile. Your clients? I asked, raising an eyebrow. I wasn't aware you had any, Georgia. Which clients were yours? The ones who liked your Instagram posts, or the ones who actually paid the bills for this? Vibe. They were our clients, she spat. Artisans' clients, and you poached them. It's illegal. We can sue you. No, you can't, I said flatly. I never signed a non-compete, a rather significant oversight on your part as CEO. I turned to my father. And on yours as the founder, but you always said we were family, and family doesn't need contracts. Right. My father flinched. And I didn't poach anyone, I continued, my voice sharp and clear, cutting through the heavy air. I resigned. And my clients, yes, my clients, the ones whose trust I spent 15 years earning, chose to follow the person who actually does the work. They left because their new CEO tried to manage a multi-million-dollar installation project by sending them a link to a mood reel. Georgia's face went white, then crimson. You, how did you? Mr. Grayson told you. He did, I said. He also told me you offered him a 20% discount. A 20% discount on a 40% revenue stream, Georgia. Did you even look at the margins before you made that offer? Or did that not factor into your dynamic paradigm? Georgia opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no answer. She had never known the margins. And Lee and Sons, I pressed on. A DJ, Georgia? You tried to sell a DJ booth to a ball-bearing manufacturer. They've used the same 10x20 exhibit for 5 years. They don't want experiential. They want their freight to arrive on time, a fact you would know if you had ever once read a client brief. This isn't helping, Emma, my mother cried. What are we going to do? This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I calmly opened my portfolio and slid 3 documents across the table. These are my terms, I said. My father picked them up, his hands trembling. What is this? Vance Design Logistics. That's my new company, I said. Mr. Grayson, Lee and Sons, and Apex Solutions have all signed exclusive contracts with me. Their business is gone. It's not coming back. Georgia let out a strangled sob. The bank, I continued, is foreclosing on these assets on Monday. You have nothing to offer them. You are bankrupt. Your suppliers haven't been paid, your employees are about to be laid off, and you have no liquid capital. So you are here to ruin us, my father whispered, the paper rattling in his grip. No, I said. I'm here to make an offer. I pointed to the documents. That is a contract. Vance Design will be acquiring all of Artisan Corporate Design's physical assets, the trucks, the warehouse equipment, the fabrication machinery, for the exact PR. ICE of the outstanding bank loan. I will be assuming your debt. The bank gets paid in full. You walk away with nothing, but you also owe nothing. You avoid total financial ruin and public bankruptcy. My mother stared at me. Acquiring, you're buying, you're taking our company. I'm saving it, I corrected her, or at least the useful parts. The Artisan brand is worthless. The Vibe Studio is a write-off, but the machinery in the workshop, the transport fleet, I built that, I sourced it. I'm not letting it go to a bank auction. Georgia looked at me, her mind finally catching up. And us? What about us? What about me? This is my company. This company is a sinking ship, and you are the one who drilled the holes in the hull, I said, my voice dropping. You get nothing. Mom and Dad get to retire without being sued by creditors. But you get what you've earned. You can't do this, she shrieked. Dad, tell her, Mom, she can't just take it. My parents were silent. My father looked at the contract, then at me. He saw the cold, hard logic. He saw the escape hatch I was offering. He saw the woman his daughter had become. It's over, Georgia, he said, his voice a hollow echo of his former self. No, she screamed. I'm the CEO, you can't just. You are the CEO of nothing, I snapped, my control finally breaking. You are the CEO of a bankrupt shell of a failed marketing experiment. I am the one with the clients. I am the one with the capital. I am the one the bank would rather deal with. You have no power here. You have no leverage. You have no people skills that can fix this. You are a failure. The words hung in the air, brutal and true. Georgia stared at me, her face pale with shock and hatred. Then she let out a guttural sound, grabbed her purse, and stormed out of the conference room, slamming the door so hard the neon sign in the lobby flickered and died. I looked at my parents. My mother was crying silently. My father, with a deep, shuddering sigh, reached for a pen. The following Monday was a whirlwind. My lawyer and I met with the bank. They were, as I'd predicted, overjoyed. Instead of a messy, protracted bankruptcy and an auction of depreciated assets, they were getting a single, clean check. Vance Design, backed by the new ironclad contracts from Grayson and the others, was a far more stable and attractive partner than the floundering Artisan Design. The deal was signed before noon. The building, the warehouse, the trucks, and the machinery were all mine. My first act was to rehire the core workshop and logistics team, the people who, like me, had been doing the actual work for years and had been terrified of losing their jobs. Their relief was palpable. My second act was to have the locks on the executive offices changed. My parents had signed the papers and disappeared. I assumed they had gone to their home to lick their wounds, but I had underestimated Georgia. She, apparently, still believed she had a say in the matter. I was in the warehouse on Tuesday, personally directing the loading of the trucks for the Lee and Sons exhibit, the one I was rescuing from Georgia's DJ booth disaster, when my phone rang. It was my father. "Emma, you need to. I think you should come to the house," he said. He sounded exhausted. "It's Georgia." "I'm busy, Dad," I said, signaling to the foreman. "I have a deadline." "Please," he begged. She's threatening to go to the press, to social media. She's saying you committed fraud, that you conspired with the bank. She's saying all sorts of crazy things. Your mother is a wreck. She won't listen to us." I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose. Of course. When her charm failed, she resorted to threats. This was the other side of her people skills. "Fine, I'll be there in an hour," I said. When I arrived at my parents' home, the scene was even worse than I'd imagined. Georgia was pacing the living room, her phone in her hand, her face blotchy and tear-stained. My mother was on the sofa, weeping. My father was just standing there, looking helpless. "There she is," Georgia snarled when she saw me. "The thief. I'm so glad you're here to see this. I'm live streaming to the company Instagram right now. I'm telling everyone how you..." "You're live streaming to an account that I now own?" I asked, pulling out my own phone. "Go ahead. I'll just have my admin delete it. Oh, and by the way, that's trademark infringement." Georgia froze, her thumb hovering over the Go Live button. You wouldn't." "I would," I said. "But more importantly, Georgia, I came here to give you this." I pulled a thick envelope from my bag and tossed it onto the coffee table in front of her. "What is this?" she asked, eyeing it with suspicion. "That," I said, "is the full investigative report I had my analyst run on Artisan Corporate Design. The one I didn't show the bank, because I was trying to be kind to Mom and Dad. But sync. You seem to want to play this out. Let's play." I nodded to the file. "Go on, open it." Hesitantly, she opened the clasp and pulled out the top page. I knew what it showed. The invoices from her friend's PR firm. "You paid your friend's consulting firm $200,000 for that rebranding campaign," I said, my voice calm and cold. "A firm that was registered just 6 months ago, has no other clients, and lists a residential area post office box as its address. That's not just bad business, Georgia. That's embezzlement. You were funneling company money from the loans Dad took out, directly to your friend." My mother let out a gasp. My father's face went ashen. "Emma, that can't be." "Oh, it gets worse," I said, my gaze locked on Georgia, who looked like she was about to faint. "Turn to page 4. The expense reports for the last quarter. The client dinners at restaurants that, oddly enough, you paid for on the same nights you were posting vacation photos from Miami. The company car you're driving, which is a two-seat luxury sports car leased in Artisan's name. The $50,000 you spent on the Vibe Studios neon sign, all of it charged to the company. You weren't just a bad CEO, Georgia, you're a fraud. You were actively, consciously bankrupting your own family to fund your lifestyle. Georgia sank onto the sofa, the papers slipping from her hand. She was speechless. The truth, in stark black and white, had finally done what reason and emotion never could. It had silenced her. I gave the bank just enough information to show them the company was insolvent, I said, speaking to my parents now. I did not show them this. I did not tell them that their loans were being used to fund your daughter's shopping sprees. I let them believe it was just a series of bad business decisions. I saved this family from a criminal investigation. I saved you, I said, pointing at Georgia, from a lawsuit that would have landed you in jail. My mother was staring at Georgia, her expression one of dawning, sickening horror. Georgia, is this true? Tell me this isn't true. Georgia just stared at the floor, silent tears of humiliation and rage rolling down her cheeks. She had no more lies, no more charm. So here's the deal, I said, taking back the file. You are going to give me your phone. You are going to write down the passwords to every social media account and every company login you still have. You are going to walk away, and you are never going to use the Artisan or Vance name again. In exchange, I am not going to forward this report to the district attorney. You're blackmailing me, Georgia whispered. No, I said. I'm giving you the same choice you gave me. You can have your pride or you can have your future. You don't get both. I'm offering you a clean break. It's more than you offered me. My father, who had been silent this whole time, finally stirred. He walked over to his daughter, his face a mask of profound disappointment. He gently took the phone from her hand and then slid it across the coffee table to me. Write down the passwords, Georgia, he said, his voice void of all its former warmth. Just do what she says. Georgia, broken, did as she was told. I took the phone and the piece of paper. Good, I have a company to run. I turned and walked out of the house, leaving the three of them in the ruins of the family they had built. The spell was finally broken. The antagonist's people skills had been revealed for what they were, a hollow, parasitic charm that had almost destroyed them all. 2 months later, the Vance Design Logistics launch party was in full swing. I hadn't wanted a party, but Mr. Grayson had insisted. You didn't just reopen, Emma, he'd argued. You won. You need to plant the flag. So I'd held it in the last place my family would ever expect. The newly scrubbed, repainted, and rebranded warehouse. I'd cleared the main floor, strung up elegant lighting, and brought in a string quartet and a high-end catering company. The cavernous space, which once smelled of sawdust and packing grease, now buzzed with the quiet, confident hum of real success. The guest list was a strategic masterpiece. Mr. Grayson was there, holding court by a display of his project's blueprints. Mr. Lee of Lee & Sons was laughing with the CEO of Apex Solutions, both of them having had their projects delivered flawlessly by my team. My top suppliers were there, my beaming employees were there, and most importantly, the top executives from every potential new client I wanted to land were there. This wasn't just a party, it was a statement. It was a public unveiling of the new power player in corporate design. I was thanking Mr. Grayson for his speech when I saw them. My parents in Georgia. They stood just inside the main loading bay entrance, framed by the cold night air, looking utterly lost. They hadn't been invited. My father and mother were in their old, dated Busey Ness formal clothes, but it was Georgia who was the most shocking. She was thin, her hair was a dull brown, and she was wearing a cheap-looking dress. The vibrant, glowing charisma was gone. She just looked average and angry. A hush fell over the section of the party nearest the door. My father spotted me and started walking over, my mother and Georgia trailing him like reluctant shadows. Emma, my father said, his voice strained. This is quite the event. We just wanted to come and to talk. I don't think we have anything to talk about, Arthur, I said, my voice polite, but not warm. Mr. Grayson, ever the ally, stood silently by my side. Please, Emma, my mother chimed in, her hands twisting. We just want to apologize. We were wrong. We see that now. We're destitute, Emma, my father said, his voice cracking. The house. We had to sell the house. We're living in a small apartment. I'm working as a greeter at a hardware store. Your mother is, she's not well. I looked at them. I felt a small, cold pang of something, but it wasn't pity, it was just closure. And I'm a receptionist. Georgia suddenly spat, shoving past my father. Her eyes were burning with a desperate, wild hatred. A receptionist, me, answering phones for a dentist. Do you know how humiliating that is? I imagine it's very difficult, I said simply. You did this, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the suddenly silent warehouse. The quartet stopped playing. All eyes were on us. You took everything. You took my company. You took my future. You ruined our lives. She was creating a scene, just as she always had, expecting her people skills to rally the crowd to her. But this wasn't her crowd. These weren't people who could be dazzled by a pretty dress or a mood reel. These were CEOs, suppliers, and engineers. These were my people. I held up a hand, and the low murmur of the crowd died instantly. I waited a beat, letting her accusation hang in the air. I didn't take your company, Georgia, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the concrete floor. I bought a collection of defaulted assets at a bank foreclosure. Assets you ran into the ground. I turned to the assembled guests. My apologies, everyone. This is my family. I turned back to my sister. You seem to be under the same delusion you've always been, Georgia. You think this, I gestured to the party, the clients, the buzzing success, was your company. It never was. It was given to me, she cried. It was my name, my vision. And what a vision it was, I said. I nodded to Mr. Lee, who was watching with a grim expression. You told Mr. Lee here that you were going to bring a DJ to his industrial ball-bearing exhibit. A few nervous titters went through the crowd. And you, I said, pointing to the CEO of Apex, you sent him a link to your Instagram when he asked for a server room delivery manifest. The titters grew into quiet, incredulous laughter. Georgia's face crumpled. She had tried to make me the villain, but I was simply holding up a mirror. This, I said, my voice ringing with a final, unshakable authority, is what a company built on competence looks like. This is what happens when deadlines are met and contracts are honored. This is the company I built while you were busy trying to curate a vibe. You were never a CEO, Georgia. You were just a very expensive, very damaging hobby. Georgia looked around, her eyes darting from face to face. She was looking for an ally, for one person to look at her with sympathy. She found none. She saw Mr. Grayson looking at her with cold contempt. She saw Mr. Lay shaking his head in disgust. She saw my own employees, her former employees, looking at her with pity and relief. The public humiliation was total. The spell was well and truly broken. In a final, powerful moment of realization, she understood, she had no people. She had no power, she had nothing. With a choked, animalistic sob, she turned and fled, pushing her way out of the loading bay and disappearing into the night. My mother made a move to follow her, but my father put a hand on her arm. He looked at me, his face a ruin of shame and regret. She really did it, didn't she? He whispered. The embezzlement, all of it. Yes, I said, she did. He nodded slowly, the final piece of his denial falling away. I see. Well, congratulations on your success, Emma. You've earned it. He turned, and with my mother leaning heavily on him, they shuffled out of my warehouse, out of my party, and out of my life. Mr. Grayson put a hand on my shoulder. The string quartet, taking his cue, softly began to play again. The buzz of conversation slowly resumed. Well, he said, handing me a fresh glass of champagne, that was experiential. I looked at him, and for the first time in my entire adult life, I laughed. A real, genuine, unrestrained laugh. I was final. Lie completely free. The downfall of my family was as quiet as my party had been loud. With the bank loan satisfied, they were no longer in debt, but they were, as my father had said, destitute. They had sold the large family home and moved into a cramped, two-bedroom apartment. My father kept his job as a greeter. My mother, broken by the stress and the revelation of Georgia's fraud, rarely left the apartment. Georgia, I heard from a former employee, had been fired from the dentist's office for poor attitude. She was last seen working a temp job, filing paperwork in a windowless office park. The full force of her people skills had finally met the reality of a world that valued substance. I, on the other hand, flourished. Vance Design Logistics was a resounding success. The public showdown at the launch party had cemented my reputation. Clients saw, in real time, that I was a person of integrity and unshakable competence. The executives who had been potential clients that night all signed contracts within the month. I used my professional network to its fullest. I hired a top COO to manage the day-to-day operations, freeing me up to do what I did best: build relationships and design flawless logistical systems. Within 6 months, I had doubled the business that Artisan had ever done in its best year. I had also, very pointedly, set up a generous profit-sharing plan and robust benefits for my employees, the team I had brought with me, who had been undervalued for just as long as I had. About a year after the takeover, I was in my new office, a beautiful, light-filled space with a view of the entire city, when my assistant told me I had a visitor. It was my father. He stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking even older than he had at the party. "Arthur," I said, standing up, "what can I do for you?" I'm not here to ask for anything, Emma," he said, his voice quiet. I wanted to see it. What you've built, it's incredible." "Thank you," I said. "Would you like a coffee?" He sat, and for a few minutes, we just talked. He told me about his job. He told me my mother was starting to go for walks again. He told me he hadn't spoken to Georgia in 3 months. "She blames us," he said, staring into his coffee cup. She says we never taught her the boring stuff, that we always just praised her for being charming, and she's right. I wanted the easy path. I wanted to believe that charm was enough. It was easier than admitting how much we needed you, Emma, how much I relied on you and never once told you." He looked up and his eyes were filled with a profound, weary sadness. "I was a fool. I was a terrible father, and I am so sorry." It was the apology I had waited my entire life to hear. And as I heard it, I realized I didn't need it anymore.